Denise, our first speaker.
Good morning, family. My name's Denise. I'm an addict. One thing I've learned around Narcotics Anonymous is when they say that they have a slot they need to fill and the workshop's in a half hour, you have the willingness to step up, even if you're not prepared and you really didn't plan on doing a workshop. You know, that's what keeps us together. That's what keeps us unified. That's how we run these things. So keep it simple is our topic this morning. And I know for myself as an addict that I like to complicate everything. I mean, I can make a mountain out of the smallest thing. I don't know if it's an addict, if it's my personality, or both of them together, but it definitely is how I sometimes view things in life. And you know, one of the biggest things that they teach us up in here is life on life's terms. You know, no matter what God throws your way, which that's who my higher power is. Everybody has their own. Jesus Christ is mine. Well, no matter what God throws my way, I have to deal with it in a simple manner without using drugs or alcohol or any other mind or mood altering chemical. And that includes marijuana. Some people seem to think that that has a little world of its own. It really is a drug, even though it's legal. But to deal with life on life's terms without getting all complicated, without making myself a wreck, without veering from the program in the 12 Steps of Narcotics Anonymous. When I first got here, they told me, you know, the first year's a gift. I did not feel it was a gift. I did not see it as a gift. It was very, very hard. It was very hard, you know, between the court appearances, between all the things that my past had caused. My first year, I was in court constantly, fighting to get my son back from the state of Michigan. So it wasn't a gift. It was a struggle. It was a very hard struggle to stay clean. And, you know, keep it simple. When I was in treatment, you know, you get these 30 days to get your life together, get your head out of your butt, and blah, blah, blah. So when they said it was time to go, I said, I don't want to go. I want to stay. I'm safe in here. You know, out there is where life is, and I don't want to do life yet. I'm not ready. And so they made me leave, and couldn't stay, insurance purposes. But as I got out there, you know, you go to your first meeting. I remember walking to my first meeting, and people just like, whoa, they're on you. Whoa, newcomer, get her. And some are good, some are bad. But they said, you know, you need to get a sponsor. And I was like, okay, sponsor, yeah, somebody telling me what to do. That goes real well with me. Well, it didn't go real well with me because I'm one of them women that you tell me what I can't have and I'll have it. And you tell me I can't do it and I'll do it. You know, that's who I was. That's not who I am today. But have someone tell me how to do the 12 Steps of Narcotics Anonymous, I really wasn't signing up for that program. You know, I was just here to get clean and get my kid back. So that part of keeping it simple, I really didn't want to wrap my head around. But the part where you have to do 90 and 90, I got that because anytime I came to a meeting, I could get my square and be safe and be okay, you know, and leave knowing I wasn't going to use drugs that day, just that day. And as far as getting involved, I didn't get involved in Narcotics Anonymous for 3 years. I stood back on the sidelines, scared to death. I came in, I wore leather, I carried a piece, I packed a, you know, I was not pink and fuzzy, shall we say. So women stayed away from me and I stayed away from them because that's how it worked for me. I didn't like women, I didn't trust women, I wanted nothing to do with them. The men were cool. But the women I couldn't get with, and it was about keeping it simple. So I just did my meetings. I had to live in a 3-quarter house. You know, when I lost custody, the state will give you a little repertoire of what you have to do in order to get your kid back, and that's what you got to do. You just got to follow their guidelines. So I lived in a 3-quarter house with 8 women. There was nothing simple about 8 women in a house. I want to kill them on a regular basis, you know, on a regular basis. But it was like, okay, work the steps, blah, 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 blah. So part of keeping it simple was they said, get a journal. Get a journal and write in it, you know. In treatment, they told me this. So I got a journal. I have 21 years of journals. The stack is this damn high. But I'll tell you what those journals do for me. When I come into a situation today that I have to get through clean without using, I can refer back to how I got through that death 2 years ago. I can refer back how I got through that broken relationship without using drugs. Wow, I did that? Oh, okay, maybe I should do that again. I mean, that keeps it simple for me. I have a roadmap of how I did recovery without using, which is cool. Plus, it's a good way to get things out. So I still journal to this day. And that is keeping it simple. That's as simple as it gets, is to sit down with pen and paper and put your thoughts down. And I know I like to make, like I said, a mountain out of molehill. And things happen in recovery that sometimes I have no control over, believe it or not. And God help me. And I know that dropping to my knees and asking my higher power to give me the strength, courage, and wisdom to get through certain situations without drugs and alcohol, he does provide me that. But other times, I have to have the knowledge and the courage to do it with what I have in here. Because sometimes my God likes to help me grow, shall we say. They say when you're in pain, you grow the most, So sometimes it's hard to keep it so simple as we speak of. I remember when I first got here, one of the little acronyms was KISS, which is keep it simple, stupid. And I'm like, I'm not stupid. I'm only a drug addict, an alcoholic, and, doping, but I never really cared for that one. But keep it simple. The first year is the gift. And I know at first I did not believe that. I really didn't. But after your first year, you got to start looking at yourself. Your first year's a pink cloud. You're clean, life's good, life's coming back, things are coming back, everything's working good. After that, you got to start looking at who you are, what you want, what you believe in, where you going, what are you going to be when you grow up. These are all the things that, start occurring to you at year 2, year 3, year 4. And then there's that beautiful 4th step that we all love so much around Narcotics Anonymous, and we will make that thing the biggest nightmare of our lives, and it's really simple. You just sit down with pen and paper. I mean, it is really simple, and it is so relieving to do. It is like getting a bunch of monkeys off your back, so to speak. But I know that if we just go to meetings, don't use, call our sponsor. A lot of people get in a women's group, if you will, or a men's group and work the Green and Gold book. It's the 12 Steps in Narcotics Anonymous. It's a really awesome book. And I was in a women's group for 13 years, the same women for 13 years. Some died, some, went back out, but we always replaced them with somebody, and we rolled on, and it was awesome. It was a way to make a bond with women, a deep, real bond, real friends. And I know that going to the coffee shop after meetings was where I got a lot of my recovery, when there was one-on-one, where people actually got to know each other and bond. Instead of at a meeting, I don't know how you guys do them here, but we sit around the table, we share, each person shares like 5 minutes, and then at the end we close, which really don't give you time to connect with that person, But afterwards, when you go to the coffee shop or you go to a restaurant and have dinner, that's when you make the relationships and the bonds, and you really get to know each other. And that's pretty simple stuff there, Go, eat well, and get to know somebody and have a great friendship. Narcotics Anonymous is not, and the program is not a difficult thing to work in our lives. We make it difficult. The fact of the matter is, you just don't have to use. That's it. If you do nothing all day, but you don't pick up a drug, you've accomplished another day clean, and it's a good day. And that's how I look at it. And every morning I ask God to give me the strength not to use drugs. And it don't matter how long I've been around this place. Does not matter. Because I can get up any day and go get high. Because my socks didn't match. I mean, that's who we are. Really. And so, for Denise, to keep it simple, I wake up and ask God to remove the obsession and compulsion to use drugs just for today. And he's like, yeah, I've been doing it for a while for you. Yeah, and you will continue. Because that's how I stay clean. And every night I thank the man, because it's another successful day. And I wouldn't have 21 years if I didn't do that, if I didn't stay in contact with God, if I didn't do the program simple. Just go to meetings, don't use, get a sponsor, do some writing, look at yourself. One of the biggest things that helped me grow was looking at a mirror and looking at the woman looking back at me, you know, and all that pain, all that shame, all that stuff from all of my past had to be confronted and worked through, because the woman looking back at me was me. And I know what I've done to her and where I've taken her and the things that I've done, and I had to learn to start forgiving her like quick, or this was not going to work. So keeping it simple is easy enough if you just follow the guidelines NA sets down for us. And there's people who have recovery that will guide you, no matter 1 day clean, 1 hour clean, 1 minute clean. There are people that will embrace you till you can love yourself, because around here, when we come in, we're tore up from the floor up. We really don't love ourselves, nor do we know ourselves. But there are people in these rooms in Narcotics Anonymous that will love you, guide you, connect with you, and help you through the 12 steps in your recovery. And it's awesome. It's awesome, the love, the friendships, the unity, everything, the activities, this convention. So keeping it simple for me is just asking my higher power to keep me clean. Go to a meeting, see my friends, work a step, call a sponsor if I'm in a jam, do some writing if I can't get a hold of somebody, because there's times everybody's busy. Everybody has a life today, a very busy life, I've noticed. And so when I can't get a hold of somebody, I write. And it helps get it out. It's on paper. I can reread it. I can rewrite it. I can do whatever I want with it. And for me, keeping it simple is just not picking up for that day. And then it's a good day. Thanks. I would like to introduce Rick.
Thank you, Denise. I'm an addict. My name's Rick.
Hey, Rick.
I'm going to pull out my basic text. It's 2012. Walking through registration yesterday and getting shanghaied. You know, and you don't say no to NA, but they said, what did I want to share on? I said, whatever you guys want to hear from me. So they wanted me to keep it simple. I'm capable of that sometimes today. Thank you, Denise. Denise is one of the friends I have at We Grow with Love. You know, and for years, you know, we'd hug and say hi, so maybe talk a minute or two. And a few years ago, we'd talk for 3 or 4 minutes, and a couple of years later, we'd talk for 5 or 15 minutes. And, you know, that's the beauty of this particular function, you know, that there are people that come and go in your life, especially in recovery. But the friends I make here, that I keep seeing here, there's a special place, you know. And that's one of the beauties of We Grow with Love. And I want to thank the committee. 20 years, whew, man, you know. I heard about this, I had 4 months clean, and I wasn't ready. And then the second year, Memorial Day weekend, had family stuff. And I think it was probably around ISNAC, around March. And talked to someone from North Central, and they said they hadn't seen me up here, and I made that commitment. And I know I've missed a year or two. There's been some years that, you know, through work or whatever, I could get out for a day, you know. But it's truly an amazing experience. And I've traveled the country and gone to functions and conventions everywhere. And this is truly, you know, heart and soul of NA. It really blows me away. With keeping it simple, I actually looked the word up in how it works, and it appears a few times. And first time it shows up is in the third step. It says, surrendering to the will of our higher power gets easier with daily practice. When we honestly try, it works. Many of us start our day with a simple request for guidance from our higher power. And, you know, I'm just like everyone here. And Denise said it, we complicate stuff, you know. Wasn't until years later that I ran into someone, and he knows I steal this because it's so apt for the third step. And he was the first person I heard say he was blessed with a higher power that was different from a God of his parents' understanding. You know, and that was freedom there. You know, the freedom, the ability to understand a higher power of my own. And in the step, it actually says understood. For me, that gives me the freedom to actually reacquaint myself, get to know a different perspective, not stay rigid in my definition of whatever that higher power is. And to me, it's one of the most beautiful things about Narcotics Anonymous is that freedom of our own higher powers, which for me, when I'm sitting in a meeting like this, or in a meeting, any kind of function, you know, I have this understanding for myself that it's our higher power, you know, and it doesn't matter what the individual higher powers are. We each have a perspective, but when we have that perspective coming together, our higher power speaks through our members, you know. And the fourth step says, no one's forcing us to give up our misery. The step has a reputation of being difficult. In reality, it's quite simple. And you know, the whole, for me it was, I'm never going to do it right. It's not going to be perfect. You know, it led me to give myself excuses to either not try or not give my best, you know, because I just wasn't good enough. It wasn't going to be perfect, wasn't going to be right. And I finally had to get guidance from my sponsor about pen, paper, thoughts into words on the paper. And that helped me get past the, I'm never going to do this right, so I bother, you know. And then in the fifth step, it says, we do not procrastinate, we must be exact. We want to tell the simple truth, cut and dried as quickly as possible. There's always a danger we'll exaggerate our wrongs, and equal danger it will minimize or rationalize away our part in past situations. And that, to me, that directly speaks about the thinking aspect of my disease, you know? And that's one of the reasons that I put the pen to the paper to write this thing. If I just thought about it and spewed it, you know, fourth and fifth combined during coffee, every waking thought I have is clouded by a disease that wants me miserable before I'm dead, you know? And that's why I need to get away from the thoughts and into the actions. And when I actually first started writing my fourth step on a computer, and it was a breeze. I was just, you know, running right through it. And I told my sponsor what a great idea I had to write my fourth step on the computer, and got some good simple directions about pen and paper. You know, there's some connection in the brain that doesn't quite get it, you know, and I was journaling on the computer. I was doing everything on the computer. And there's quite the difference between looking at a screen and typing and actually sitting down with a pen and writing. It hits a different part of the brain. And, you know, I answered the same questions on the worksheets with a pen. It was entirely different. So, you know, that was one of the first major glaring, you know, keep it simple things from my sponsor that to this day I use. And also on the fourth step, one of the things that sounded strange, you know, get the composition book, not the ring binder. Composition book has the pages bound into it, and then I write the steps on the right side. And there's always something, even with that flap, no matter how you do it, you know. My present sponsor, I love him. The first time we went through the steps, we do it the way they did it 50 years ago. Well, 25 years ago, ever since the basic text came out. You know, paper, pen, book, you know, read a paragraph, write a couple sentences. That's about as old school as it gets. But then he told me that that left page is blank, and those thoughts that don't have anything to do with answering a question or where I'm writing on, that belongs on paper too. And that's what that blank piece of paper's for. Some of these things sound really stupid, and you know, I was willing to do them, and I might not have seen an immediate benefit. The blank page part, I didn't really get that until I worked with a sponsee, you know, and he was gung-ho, and he had almost as much writing, not answering the question, over on the blank side. And that stuff was immediate, you know, day-to-day, how do I recover through this? And then that really brought home to me, there's been some really stupid suggestions that I go, oh heck no. And then I get willing and I follow them. You know, I had a grant sponsor, I had about 3 years clean, had something that concerned my sponsor, so I took it to him. And he didn't say nothing about my sponsor. He gave me that suggestion, every day for 30 days, look at yourself in the mirror, hug yourself in the eye, look at yourself, hug yourself, and say, I love you. And even after a few years clean, it wasn't easy, you know? And that's what the difference between the simple but not easy program. Some of the simplest stuff I hear around here, some of the most difficult things for me to get and to do. And it probably took me close to 2 months to get 30 days straight, you know? But the benefit of that, and it's something that about once a year, about the same time, all right, put myself on that 30-day regimen. It's time to love myself again, you know? The sixth step, we surrender to the simple suggestions that the program offers us. Even though we're not entirely ready, we're headed in that direction. You know, and everything I really need to know about daily recovery and program, I heard in the first 2 weeks, 30 days. I actually heard them within the first 60 days and 90 days where, you know, I listened. And I've yet to apply all those suggestions on a daily basis. I've applied all of them in my program different times, you know? And there's one of the daily readings in the Just for Today meditation, what worked for us in the past, we've kind of let go for a while, and whether things are getting too smooth or too crunchy, you know, I take an inventory of my program and go, oh, you know, I used to do this, and it fell out. And I'll bring that back in, you know. The biggest constant I've had, the first simple suggestion I followed, was from one of them crusty old guys when I was only concerned about a symptom of my disease. And he's the one that suggested, start your morning off saying, thank you and I need help. End your day with, thank you, you know. And after a few years, once I got old, in recovery, I was putting a lot more emphasis on that morning thank you. That first breath, the eyes wake up, I go, oh wow, thank you. It takes on a different meaning at different stages, as you progress through recovery. First year or two I was saying it was thank you for not having me wake up with the stupid rattling brain, body rebellion, all that stuff associated with the symptom of drug use. And today it's just, not just thank you for that first breath, thank you for the relationship, that my higher powers allowed me to have with them. Thank you that I know somewhere in the day you're going to show me something, and I hope I have the ability to pay attention. Because sometimes God speaks, and I'm still off in self-will land, And it doesn't matter if it's rainbow, butterfly, good friend calls I haven't talked to in a few months, I can just speed right by that in a heartbeat because it wasn't on my agenda for the next 5 minutes. And so a lot of times that thank you is just for the simple fact of being able to be present in my own life, and being available and open to whatever it is my higher power is trying to touch me with that day. And we get on to the 12th step. In the 12th step, it says we share from our own personal experience what it's been like for us. The temptation to give advice is great, but when we do so, we lose the respect of newcomers. This clouds our message. A simple, honest message of recovery from addiction rings true. And God, I've pissed off some old-timers. Because for some reason, there's some cycles in recovery. I don't know if they're unique or if I'm the only one that's picked them out. And it's kind of like you hear that popping sound at 5 years, and then the head gets sucked back in at 10, and it pops back out at 15. And it's been my experience and observation that somewhere around 8 years, people are really willing to give advice. And again, somewhere over 18 years, people are really willing to give advice. And, out of love and respect for the program, I've had to talk to a couple people about not sharing their experience, because I know exactly how that feels like. The finger comes out, I hear the word you, and then after that, all I hear is the adults from Peanuts. Wah, 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 wah. Because it's not ringing true. It's not someone sharing their experiences. They're sharing their perspective of me as honestly as they can, but to me, that's not how recovery works. And, when I read that this morning, I was like, oh, I better watch that. It's one of my soapbox issues. So when I stay honest to myself and share, about my recovery and my experiences, and there are times when I borrow experiences from addicts that I've lived through them with, But to pull out the finger and say what you need is self-defeating, It's teaching pigs to sing. And all you're going to do is annoy the pigs and waste your time. There, rant off. Very simply put, I have a disease, and the basic text tells me it has a couple parts, and the two parts that it tells me are obsession and compulsion. And one of the simplest definitions of obsession in the basic text, it says, is a fixed idea. And yeah, it doesn't matter if it's 30 seconds or half an hour or 3 months. This is a fixed idea. That means I'm not open-minded. I'm not willing to accept other perspectives. And more than likely, I'm not being honest with myself. because any fixed idea in my head comes from a disease that wants me suffering and dead. And the more fixed it is, the less willing I'm going to be to outside perspective. And if I don't catch it, that's what I need you people for. In the Just for Today reading, it says, I will try to gain a better perspective on my life. And that's not coming from my brain. It's not coming from between my ears. It's coming from you people. When I learned how to value your perspective of me over what my brain was telling me, I got better. Because when people tend to share their perspective with me, it comes from a place usually of love and respect and care. It's not always kind, because sometimes we don't want people giving us a 6-step list. And it's some of the hardest suggestions I had. Someone said this to me, someone said that to me, And the old timer I asked about that one, he said, that's pretty simple. You say thank you. They're giving you a gift of themselves, of their perspective. There's no reason to go, yes, but I was thinking this, and you might have been seeing that. It doesn't matter. They're sharing their perspective. I don't have to share my diseased thinking back at them. And that was one of the most simple suggestions I've had, and it's the one that I remember to use the most. I'm no good with compliments. Yeah, but, I dropped the ball, or, whatever. I'll find some way out of a compliment. And again, it was the same guy. He says, thank you. That's as simple as it gets. And those are, a couple of my glaring character defects there, wrapped up in just saying thank you. But I have this disease of fixed idea. That's the obsession. And then the compulsion, I got to the dictionary, and sometimes I like to go to the thick one, and, because it's addicted oriented, I usually go to the third or fourth definition of words. And the definition I found for compulsion that rang true for me was acting without thought. So my disease is a fixed idea that I act on without thought, much to my detriment. It might seem like a great thing at the instant, not so much 30 seconds or 3 months later, sometimes years, And I had a sponsor. I was bouncing in and out a couple years, 2.5 years. He was somewhere in between 90 days and 6 months. It was a milestone for him, and he was over at the house, and we were, going over some step work. And this guy had been to a lot of meetings. Never seen him at coffee. Never seen him at a picnic. Never seen him anywhere in the fellowship except the meeting. And for whatever reason, he valued some of my input, and so we had started on a weekly basis doing the actual sponsor or sponsee thing. And we went over something, and he puts down his writing. He looks at me, and he says, "Rick, I know I'm doing better." He says, "I'm getting a lot better, and I'm really close to figuring this stuff out, because once I finally figure out what this disease of addiction is, I know I'll have it made." And by the time he got through saying that, I was crying. That's not the simplicity of the program, It isn't. The only definition I need of addiction is it wants me dead, wants me miserable until I die, wants me to make everyone around me miserable, and the largest symptom, the outward sign of that addiction I had before I got here was using drugs. Pretty simple. You know, that's all I need to know to start trying to get the help I need to progress from where I was the day before I walked into a meeting, you know, onto this daily journey, this progression of recovery. And how does that start? You know, how simple it is. All you got to do is stop using. You can't do really any of the step work. You can't really get any of the recovery. You got to stay clean for some period of time. And I went to functions a couple years ago, and I went up to people whose recovery I admired. You know, not always dinosaurs, but lots of them were. And I asked them, where in the basic text does it help the newcomer? Where does it give it suggestions on how not to use drugs? And, you know, the first 10 chapters, the actual program, Narcotics Anonymous, it's only about 110, 115 pages. You know, it's pretty simple. I didn't read that all the way through. I'd read a paragraph or a sentence and put the book down for a couple days until I had just over 4 months clean. And that first simple thought of the day was pot of coffee, cigarettes, back porch with the book. And I surfaced at about 10 o'clock, having finished 115 pages of the basic text. The first time I read it all the way through. And, you know, I was just astounded because I kept putting it down. You guys knew too much about me. You know, I didn't want to hear this about myself. It's like someone was following me around with cameras. And, you know, it was just too fresh. And just having read through the entire first 10 chapters, it made a difference in my approach to recovery. You know, it really got me refired up. You know, somewhere between 90 days and 6 months, it's one of the hardest humps to get over. You've been getting these pats on the backs and hugs and key tags every 30 days, you know, for 3 months, and now it's like, oh, you got to wait 3 more months. You know, and it's hard. It really is. So a couple years ago, I'm talking to people around campfires, you know, mostly campouts and functions, and saying, you know, help me out. Where does a basic text actually help me? You know, help the newcomer. You know, where's the suggestion of how not to use? And it's actually in the What Can I Do chapter. It says most of us can do for 8 or 12 hours what seems impossible for a longer period of time. If the obsession or compulsion becomes too great, put yourself on a 5-minute basis of not using. Minutes will grow to hours, hours to days, and so you will break the habit and gain some peace of mind. The real miracle happens when you realize that the need for drugs has in some way been lifted from you. You have stopped using and started to live. How stupid simple is that? How hard was that to apply in my life? And I'm going to close with this because one of the most simplest things in the basic text, one of the most simplest things in this program, you know, is the only thing they told me was going to happen at some point. You know, and it says it in the 5th tradition, I believe. Our message is that an addict, any addict, can stop using, lose the desire to use, and so find a new way of life. Our message is hope, and our promise is freedom. And it's as simple as it gets. I love you all.
Sharon. Before opening the floor for Sharon, remind you that you are being recorded. If you wish to record, please let me know so that taping can be stopped and turned on. And we still have a little bit of time left so that we can have a little bit of Sharon. It's over at 10:30. Does anybody want to come up and share? Okay. Does anyone have the willingness to read just for today?
Go ahead, Frank, roll it.
All right. Tell yourself, just for today, my thoughts will be on my recovery, living and enjoying life without the use of drugs. Just for today, I will have faith in someone in NA who believes in me and wants to help me in my recovery. Just for today, I will have a program. I will try to follow it to the best of my ability. Just for today, through NA, I will try to get a better perspective on my life. Just for today, I will be unafraid. My thoughts will be on my associates, people who are not using, who have found a new way of life. So long as I follow that way, I have nothing to fear.